Hello everyone and welcome back guys to a brand new video where today we're doing a little bit of something different. Now F1 2019 has now been out for almost 2 months and safe to say, you know, I'm still very much enjoying it. I hope you guys are as well. But obviously already, like everyone does, we start to look to what we, felt we've sort of missed from F1 2019, would like to see in the future on F1 2020 and beyond. Now that's not saying, F1 2019, I'd honestly say is probably the best all-round package we've had from an F1 game ever, in all honesty. Online, from the limited practice I've done, seems to, work pretty well. Career mode is obviously hands down the best we've ever seen, especially now driver transfers. It still amazes me they didn't advertise that more than they ended up doing so. But yeah, everything like that, it just seems like a more well-rounded game than I think we've ever seen before. Some people might not be, as big a fan of the handling model like the old days of F1 2013 and things like that. But I'd say F1 2019, yeah, it's probably the most complete F1 game we've ever had so far. So, big props to Cody's for that one. But today, I wanted to talk about 5 things I'd like to see on F1 2020. Now, whether these things will happen is very, very optimistic at the end of the day. I'm not sort of expecting these to happen. But just things, I'd like to see. Let me know down in the comments as well, things you'd like to see for F1 2020 as well. I would love to try and sort of make this into a bit of a series. Potentially, we'll have, go through sort of fan ideas and things like that from you guys as well. Potentially down at the line, do another sort of top 5, top 10 list of things we'd like to see on F1 2020 as well. The footage in the background is just from yesterday's Italian Grand Prix career mode video. At the time of recording this, I'm actually waiting for F1 to update so I can try to get Singapore recorded and up for you guys as well. Hopefully that video will be going out tomorrow if sort of everything runs smoothly and things like that. But anyway, let's dive on then straight into this. Number 1, pretty simple from me, or I'd say pretty simple, it still would be very, very big, is Formula 3. Now obviously we've had F2 dropped onto F1 2019, and I think it's a brilliant add-on. Personally, I'm quite a fan of, sort of the 3 little scenario challenges that you can do. I will, hopefully, when the 2019 expansion drops, be making a series on that. I wanted to try and do a full, proper F2 career mode. That should be dropping in about a month from now, when I'm guessing that'll be coming out. I'd love to see, for F1 2020, F3 as well. We've sort of seen this from the MotoGP games, and I'd love to see it from the F1 games as well, sort of a proper, we've obviously got this FIA ladder and everything like that, the way that the FIA believe you should be able to get into Formula 1. I'd love to see, that be able to be emulated in the F1 games. Now, I think Formula 4 is probably a bit too optimistic because, obviously there's loads of Formula 4 series all around the globe, Britain, all across Europe, Japan, America, everything like that. I feel like that would probably be a bit too extreme. But, Euro F3, or obviously FIA Formula 3, obviously, as it is known now, is, the fully fledged. It runs alongside the F1. I don't think they race at any tracks that Formula 1 doesn't. I think they obviously just follow a few of the Formula 1 tracks, obviously within Europe. And, I'd love to take sort of an F3 car around Melbourne, for example, and things like that, just somewhere a little bit different as well. So that would be something that I'd really love to see. Whether it would be integrated into career mode as well would have to be a bit of a different question, or whether, it would just be sort of a side thing like the classic cars are as well. Personally, I'd just love to see them included in the game. We've seen from personal experience just how fun things like the iRacing F3 car are, and the RSS Formula 3 car for Assetto Corsa as well. They are brilliant, brilliant fun, and I'm sure Cody's could do a good job of making those work in the Formula 1 games as well. It really just sort of opens up that whole Formula world, in my personal opinion as well. And then we move on to another idea sort of taken a bit from the MotoGP games as well, historical challenges. Now this one, I think I actually saw on Reddit a couple of days back, sort of before I even considered making this video, but I personally think, again, it would be a good idea for the Formula 1 games. And for those of you that have played MotoGP, I'm sure you're already aware about how this works. It's pretty simple. You just get put into a scenario, a bit like, we used to have even on the F1 games with the scenario mode, but say it would be a good way to sort of give the classic cars a bit more, sort of value in the game. I mean, the Senna expansion, I still haven't even touched on F1 2019. I might make a video on that down the line as well, but I just feel like at the moment the classic cars are there. I still personally do quite enjoy them, but they don't really carry much weight, and I'd love to, some historic challenges, some iconic moments back in the past. Say for example, you drive in Senna's McLaren, obviously with Nigel Mansell all over the back of him in 1992 at the Monaco Grand Prix, and things like that, even sort of other scenarios as well from more recent years. You've got to get Lewis Hamilton back up into 5th place at the Brazilian Grand Prix, things like that, you know. Although it might be a bit more difficult to implement, obviously, because you've got to get all the licensing from everyone as well. Just things like that I think would be really, really cool, and I'm sure there'd be ways to sort of work around it as well. But historical challenges I'd also love to see come to the Formula 1 games, you know, just gives the classic cars a bit more weight, gives them a bit more value in the game. We've started to see that with the Senna and Prost expansion, I think, but, you know, I'd love to see, you know, sort of a bit more fully fledged and things like that. And that sort of ties in nicely to my next point. I'd love to see some classic tracks return to the F1 games as well. Now, I know with, obviously, on F1 2013, when we had the classic tracks, they were still, I think, tracks like Imola was still the modern version of Imola, or it sort of was. It was a bit strange, the version of Imola, I think, on F1 2013. Some of it was fairly modern, some of it was a bit older, everything like that. It was a bit strange to me. Now, I'd love to see some classic tracks return, even sort of more modern classic tracks, if you will, you know, ones that have already been in the Cody's F1 games before. India, Turkey, Korea, they're sort of 3 ones I'd love to see back. Just so, you know, you could sort of experience, and I know you can do it on other games and sims. I might try and go back to doing a bit more of that down the line as well. But just so, you know, you can experience the, you know, the high downforce F1 cars of now, you know, round a few of these sort of older tracks as well. You know, Nürburgring as well is another one I'd love to see back in F1 as well. But obviously, where they're not going to be back on the calendar, it's a bit difficult. But, you know, I'd love to see some classic tracks return. I know you used to be able to mod them into the games. Obviously, they never sort of really deleted the game files back, you know, sort of pre-F1 2015. But yeah, personally, that's another thing I'd love to see, you know, some classic tracks back on F1. That would tie, obviously, in as well with the scenario mode as well there. And then we move on to, you know, sort of a couple more career mode-based things, I'd say, at the end of the day. Option 4 is a little bit of a smaller one, but one that I personally love to see as well. And that's just a bit more flexibility within the career mode. Now, this one's a little bit more difficult to explain, but, you know, I personally love to see more options in the F1 games in terms of the realism. Now, that can obviously be interpreted in many different ways. I'm sure I won't cover everything that people would sort of think about when I sort of say this on F1, but I'd love to, you know, see an option, for example, realistic engine failures, reliability, things like that, you know. For example, McLaren, you know, it's always an easy one to go with, you know, the McLaren Honda of a couple of years back. I'd love to see an option on the F1 games where you can have realistic failures. So, you know, obviously the F1 game drops about halfway through the season there or thereabouts in, you know, sort of real life. So I'd love to see, you know, they base early season, you know, reliability on things like that, you know, on the F1 2019 game, but have it as an option. Don't force it on for people. So, say, for example, someone wanted to go for, you know, a realistic McLaren Honda career mode back in the day. You know, they have engine failures and things like that a bit more. But, yeah, I cannot stress enough. Make it an option so people can disable it if they don't want it as well. You know, I can imagine some people would be pretty annoyed if they dragged the McLaren Honda, you know, like to a podium place and then it blew up with a couple of laps to go in a Grand Prix as well. But, yeah, just more realistic failures. I know we start to get it a little bit on the F1 games, but still, you know, I've only had sort of one failure as such, and that it wasn't even sort of a proper failure, ultimately. It was just the gearbox completely died on me at the Monaco Grand Prix back in season 1 of the Haas Road to Glory. But, you know, having things like that, you know, say, for example, you're having a good race and the engine just blows up for no apparent reason, you know, not that you are aware of, or something like that, would personally be something I'd love to see on the F1 games. But again, I can see why a lot of people wouldn't want it as well. That's why I'd love to see it as an option, you know, just giving the, you know, the player a bit more customized, you know, ability, flexibility with the game, things like that, you know, just to try and do a bit more of what they want with it, decide sort of how realistic this way and that they would like it as well. And then we move on to my 5th and final point for this one, and something that ultimately, you know, with how sort of quiet Cody's kept driver changes in F1 2019 anyway, something that could potentially happen. I'm doubtful, but potentially, I don't know, and this would be IRL Formula 2 drivers and moving up into F1 in the game. Obviously, we've seen, you know, Lucas Weber, Devon Butler move up into the Formula 1 world with you. I'd love to see, you know, you know, the real-life F2 drivers move up. You know, I think Nicholas Latifi obviously had a good start to the season. I don't follow F2 all too well, but yeah, you know, Nicholas Latifi gets the seat at Williams, say, for example. You know, Robert Kubica gets dropped at last, things like that. You know, Nick de Vries as well gets to drive in Formula 1, things like that, you know, just adding to the immersion and giving, you know, the game a bit more flexibility. And, you know, if we had Formula 3 as well, potentially have sort of a whole ladder system within the game. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated to do and everything like that, but it would be really, really cool to see on F1 2020. You know, just, you know, an even bigger sort of world within Formula 1 that, you know, we're already starting to see now, and I really do hope Code is trying to push this as much as possible. But there we are then, guys. That is 5 things I'd like to see on F1 2020. Like I said, leave me with your ideas down in the comments below, things you'd love to see on F1 2020 as well. I'm sure the game's probably already sort of on the drawing board, everything like that. They've probably already, you know, sort of got a few plans they'd love to see for the new game as well. But that'll do us then for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you guys next time for, hopefully, it'll be the Haas Road to Glory Singapore Grand Prix.